As ons kyk na die temas, wat inspireer jou? Wat maak dat jy na 'n tema van uitstalling kyk of na wat is dit wat jou maak teken?
It's a strange thing to say. As a child, as I said, I would have drawn the world around me. And nothing has really changed, except because I'm, by nature, not a lazy person, but I need a little bit of a kick to get me going. I tend to work with the things that make me angry. I'm driven the strongest by a reaction to something, to things that anger me. Much of my work has dealt with injustice and violence and aggression and things that unfortunately our country is so full of. And it's kind of a purging process. When something really angers me, the best way, and it's again relates to how I worked with it when I was a child, you draw it out of yourself. By drawing something, it becomes tangible and real, and you can face it and deal with it. And nothing's really changed. So much of my work, I think it's a little bit more, what's the right way of saying, more specific now or more specialized, where I'll look at a certain project. Perhaps I did some drawings 1 or 2 years ago, and I was looking at people in old age homes, and then drawing them in the ashes of the books that had mattered to them. But again, it was driven by a sense of anger. It was based on a very good friend of mine who'd gone to stay in an old age home, and I went there to visit her. And it really angered me the way, well, it upset me. It reminded me of going to the SPCA. Because you had people in little boxes, and if you walked down the hall, the number of grannies who turned around to look to the door to see if you'd come to see them was something that really bugged me. And it was based on that. So again, I work with very strong emotive things. If something upsets me or emotively makes me respond, that tends to be what I work with. Yeah.
As jy nou besluit op so 'n tema soos die oud huis, gaan jy in 'n kuier, maak mental notes, neem jy foto's, wat is jou werksproses?
In terms of that project, because I specifically wanted to work with old age pensioners, people who were prepared to allow me to photograph them, I'd have taken a camera. But my brain tends to take visual notes all the time. I think one just tends to be a visual person or a verbal person or a sound-based person. I'm constantly looking. It's sort of like a subtext to my way of thinking. I'm constantly recording and thinking. So when I would have gone to that, all the time I am looking, I'm noticing things. But then specifically for those drawings, because they needed to be quite accurate in the ash, I worked with the camera and documented the sitters. But I think it's just, as a visual communicator, you're always looking. You're always recording. Yeah.
En miskien dalk ook omdat dit van kleins af die geval was. So met ander woorde, jy kan nou na my gesig kyk en jy sal later
I can probably draw you fairly well. Not accurate enough that maybe you're going to be happy with it, but enough of a sense of, when I work with my students, I always say memory is quite selective. It distorts things, but it focuses on the elements that were important to you. So if I remember somebody and they were quite maybe emaciated or thin, you're going to over-exaggerate that, because whatever quality of that is, your brain tends to focus on. And I find that far more interesting than just a straight photographic replica. I mean, we've got cameras, we've got amazing recording devices. Why just try and emulate them? You're competing against the impossible. But one's memory allows that selective focus, that you can hone in on that aspect of that person. Maybe it was just, and again I come back to the old age pensioners that I worked with, and the one woman had these very beautiful hands, and the veins were these very pretty blue highways down. And all I can remember from her is actually her really long, very fine hands, and thinking, wow, she must have had... And it's something as selective as that. And I think it's that, when you can transfer it into a work, that brings that personal response that perhaps takes an artwork, a drawn work, to another position where a photographic image doesn't necessarily go.
Om terug te kom weer by die ouete huis, het die tema, dit wat jou kwaad maak, het dit 'n invloed op die medium wat jy op die ou ende gebruik?
I think one has more of a clinical approach to that. I mean, there's this person who I was friends with eventually died, as is inevitable for all of us. And I was aware of it. It's a proverb, I think, or a saying, when an old person dies, it's like a whole library burning down. And that was the key. So often it's words that set off keys. And I was thinking, because to her, books were incredibly important. She moved her entire little body of books with her and all the rest of it. And I remember thinking that it's accumulated wisdom. It's a lifetime's wisdom that's lost with the death of someone. And just by kind of osmosis, the idea came of drawing people in the words that they used, or the words that were important to them, became the ashes with which I drew them, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So what I would do is I'd do the interviews when I was speaking to the people in the old age homes, and then ask them to give me a list of books that had mattered to them in their lives.
Wow.
And then if I could, because that's what took almost the longest time, was scouring through secondhand bookshops, trying to find copies of those books, and then burning them, and then finding that most books actually produce exactly the same quality of ash. Didn't matter if I was doing sort of War and Peace or, Barbara Cartland, you got a kind of very similar ash.
Yeah.
But then staying true to that, of drawing them in the ashes of their own words. I did a later series working with retired academics in Pretoria,
Yeah.
and then drawing them in the ashes of things that they'd written. I would love to. Can you imagine drawing the previous apartheid government in the ashes of the laws that they'd structured on? But you know what I'm saying? So it's literally using the words of the people to produce them. Yeah.
As ons nou praat oor jou fotografiese brein wat jy het, skakel jy ooit af? Want ek kan nie dink wat se magte om prentjies dwarrel in jou kop rond.
No, you don't. I don't think you do, but you learn to not be totally and utterly distracted by it. If I'm traveling on my own, which is something I really enjoy doing, you stop talking because you're not with people, and I go totally into a visual, it's like a totally different headspace. Everything becomes sight orientated. So your eyes become the priority. Or if you're dealing with students all the time, you're listening to what they're saying as opposed to what they mean. So that element comes in. But I think as a visual person, you're constantly recording. You're constantly or selectively looking for little details that get recorded and stored. I've said to people before, and I think my brain is a lot like a sponge. It absorbs absolutely everything. And then I don't tend to plan my works that well. It's one of the reasons why I often get into trouble being late with stuff, because it takes a long time to produce them. And then the ideas leak back out again. Often not in the order you'd anticipated. But it's only after you've drawn them you realize, oh, okay, so that's what that was about. It's a very strange process. It's a kind of self-reflective thing as well, which is amazing. You get to understand your own headspace by drawing images out of it, or allowing them to leak out of your head, I think is a better way of putting it.